ASEAN Daily. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
And of course, we, as usual, will be discussing news about Southeast Asia. I know it's a very sleepy morning, Grace.
Yeah, it is very tiring. But anyways, we're going to deliver the news from Southeast Asia. And what are we talking about now here?
So, talking about news in Southeast Asia, we seldom talk about the banking sector. But ASEAN Banking Accord is a key step towards economic integration. And we always go to a lot of these ASEAN events organized by either the ASEAN Business Council or Malaysian trade ministries and all that. And a lot of the time, they always talk about how the banking sector could shape ASEAN integration. But the pace of the banking sector to adopt ASEAN in their blueprint is still quite slow in a way. So in a way, Southeast Asian nation only now have agreed to allow qualified banks to operate in each other's market freely. So that means we will be expecting banks from Singapore, Thailand, Laos, and the likes in Malaysia.
But at the same time, we have to be aware of the policies and also the regulations that each country has, because different country has a different way of having the bank system in the one country. But then it is good news because it will definitely boost up the relationship between a lot of countries in ASEAN. At the same time, it will boost the market and as well as the business areas.
That's true. And what is interesting, under this framework agreement, banks in Southeast Asia can have these reciprocal bilateral deals to operate in partner countries with the same terms as domestic financial institutions. In a way, there's more competition between banks. I'm not sure Malaysian banking industry will be happy about this, but I'm sure banks that have done well regionally or internationally would be really happy that finally they have signed this agreement.
And at the same time, we cannot ignore the risks that I mentioned before, because since different countries have a different the framework, and also they have their different mechanism. But however, at the end of it, if it is well managed, of course it will improve their long-term competitiveness and also support their expansion across the ASEAN region.
Definitely. And one thing about this agreement, it was signed by the bloc's financial ministers on Saturday, which was a few days ago. The ASEAN Banking Integration Framework, or ABIF, is aimed at ensuring more stable flow of funds in the region, increasing cross-border trade and investment. And the key aim to allow ASEAN banks to establish operations in other ASEAN countries is actually to support ASEAN corporations. And especially SMEs, because when you want to create micro loans, SMEs really need it, and usually there's just not enough choices among SMEs to get those loans.
Yeah, that's true. But then they also need to get to be able to aware of where they can get the information about all this, and what is actually the right way to achieve this goal. And ASEAN really needs to sit down and then discuss it together, and also seek for the deal on the liberalization of the trade in the financial services and also cross-border investment flows among ASEAN countries. And definitely this is something that they would love to achieve this target. And also, while this full ASEAN economic integration is going to be achieved by the end of this year, this first stage of ASEAN, the deal will deliver the low-hanging fruit, will still be important step forward the ASEAN economic integration.
And from banking sector, we move on towards ASEAN market integration. So you mentioned a lot about market, but a lot of the key focus on having an integrated market is about connectivity. So earlier on we were talking about banking sector, so it's more towards financial connectivity. But other than that, there are other forms of connectivity that governments in Southeast Asia need to focus. And of course, some of it would be the trade connectivity and physical connectivity, and this would include infrastructure. So much of Asia's new growth, particularly in the middle income countries like Thailand, Malaysia, is going to come from the services sector. And that's true. Malaysia, most of the jobs are service industry. And progress will boost faster and more stable if it can draw on a regional rather than a national talent pool. That means infrastructure without significant more investment in the physical hardware connectivity, such as the roads, railways, ports, trade that makes trade possible. And so, in a way, I totally look at this in an optimistic way that governments should be focusing a lot. But do they even have the funds for it? Because it's really expensive to maintain and build all this different physical infrastructure.
Well, that is true. To have the infrastructure comes with a lot of budget, and then unless the one country is really developing or developed country, but if you look at the ASEAN region, look, there are quite we can actually handpick which are the actually poorer countries. So in order to support, to improve this infrastructure, because we just talked about how the ASEAN wants to come to become a very good at the internet access and all those technology part as well. So that comes with the money, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So they also need to be able to manage the finance part properly.
Yeah, and one thing interesting is, according to McKinsey and Company, it forecasted that the number of middle-class households in this region will be more than double to 163 million between now and 2030. So that means we will have a larger middle-class percentile, but I'm not sure how this would affect ASEAN economic community, but more middle-class people, meaning more purchasing power and probably more trade and freer flow of goods and services, and of course a bigger market.
So definitely this is something that AEC or ASEAN overall will need to look at to improve and also achieve the same goal to make the name ASEAN truly and also to carry out its identity.
Mm-hmm. We will take one short break. When we return, we will continue discussing about key human rights issues in this region, and of course one of it will be the IS.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
We are back again with news on ASEAN Daily. So, Indonesia is currently having a visit in China, a diplomatic visit. But a lot of people were taking, he's embarking a visit not just to China but also to Japan for the first time. But what people did not expect and were taken aback was how blunt Indonesian president was towards China's main claim on the South China Sea, and he was very blunt. He said that there's no legal basis for it. I think China will be pissed off with that.
I am not so sure about the reaction from China, but then we all know that China, the nation, they claim that 90% of the South China Sea is believed to be very rich in oil and gas, and then that the Brunei, Malaysia, and the Philippines, Vietnam, and Taiwan, they led to claim the parts of the sea where China has been fighting and then putting a lot of effort to claim the South China Sea is theirs, but now because of this perhaps the blunt that I will say or very straightforward comment by Joko Widodo, it is quite sort of like quite sensitive issue to China to react towards this comment.
It is interesting because another thing that President Joko Widodo also expressed is even though he was very upfront towards China that China has no legal rights towards South China Sea, but at the same time, Jakarta also want to remain an honest broker in these very thorny territorial disputes.
And then recently, China has expressed its anger to Vietnam and also a few countries around China because Vietnam is the head of the ASEAN. He actually rejected Chinese claim based on this 9-dash life. So this is very controversial, but coming from Joko Widodo, it's another comment.
But I think in the long run, peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific should be the foremost important in the South China Sea case. Of course, you want to have a win-win situation, and right now the biggest victim is, of course, Philippines and Vietnam. And China has very, I would say, harsh relationship with them. But at the same time, if Indonesia is in the picture, I think it will somehow create a balance of power, because Indonesia is the biggest country in ASEAN, and Joko Widodo has a lot of political mileage compared to other presidents or prime minister in Southeast Asia. And of course, Joko Widodo said that he support the code of conduct towards the South China Sea, and also dialogue between China and Japan, China and ASEAN. And I think it's a great thing to have Indonesia as the honest broker in this particular issue.
And it could be just coming from fangirl basis, but then we believe that Joko Widodo has its own way and to sort out these issues, because definitely he wouldn't just visit any countries. Of course, for anyone else out there, the president of any countries will try its best to achieve the goal by visiting a certain countries.
Grace, you're not the only fangirl here.
Yeah, apparently.
So, talking about the Chinese side, apparently the China's foreign ministry appeared to downplay the remark by Indonesia's representative policy advisor Rizal Sukma, and this is regarding on the claim on the South China Sea, but repeated that China's standard line about China's sovereignty and the dispute needs sorting out between countries directly involved. So China do want to resolve the issue. It's just that China is a bit not very keen on trying to settle the dispute through the code of conduct or through something that involves other powers like the US, for example.
So this will be a very still an ongoing issues regarding this South China Sea, but this controversial and also very sensitive issue that will be sort of tackled by Indonesian President Joko Widodo.
So from Indonesia, we move on to other countries in Southeast Asia, and of course, I'm talking about countries that is plagued with ISIS. And I'm not talking about Indonesia per se. I'm talking about countries in Iraq and Syria right now. So the National Police confirmed on Sunday that last Sunday that the 5 suspected extremists in the Densus 88 counter-terrorism squad arrested has allegedly facilitated the trip of 16 Indonesian. That shows that we are getting more and more people going towards Iraq and Syria.
And at the same time, most of them are fully funded, the trip, and they're working via the working travel agents. And for them, it's pretty much easier to visit all these countries than they thought. And in fact, around 16 Indonesians, 1 male adult, 4 pregnant women, and 11 minors, they were actually arrested at the Turkish authorities somewhere in January. They were detained in the city of the Gaziantep. However, the Indonesian government was not notified of all these detentions.
That's really really a serious issue, because it seems like those who are already in Syria are accumulating resources for their future struggles. When they return for Indonesia, it's like a virus where they start in Syria or Iraq, but then when they come back, they will probably do the same thing in Indonesia's territory. In fact, just to give a number, Indonesia's alone, we have 600 people or more than that has joined ISIS in the fight for Syria and Iraq. So in a way, this is very, very serious.
It is serious, and it's not only for Indonesian, but it's also affecting ASEAN country. And in fact, we just talked about how Hong Kong is setting up this anti-terrorism the system in the country. So it is definitely attacking Southeast Asia.
Malaysia will also be tabling anti-terrorism white paper, if I'm not mistaken. Not to mention, countries in Southeast Asia have been conducting defense ministerial meeting to address issues on terrorism. But then, my biggest problem is you need to walk the talk. A lot of the time, leaders like to do a lot of talk shop, but when it comes to proper outcome, you can see the numbers. More and more people are joining, so that means that they are not doing their job, or they are doing a sloppy work.
Perhaps the information wasn't carried properly. That could be also one of the reasons. When all these people discussed regarding this matter, it's also a matter of how the messages are delivered to implement all these plans to go against this the terrorist group, and also to have more anti-terrorist group in the country.
And from Indonesia, we move on to the Philippines. Of course, this has nothing to do with ISIS, but actually it's a follow-up news on the previous operation that the Philippine government had towards Mindanao in order for them to counter the terrorist activities in the area of Mindanao. I'm talking about the issues regarding on the displaced residents. They are finally allowed to return after the fighting eases. And some 120,000 people were displaced by the Philippine Army's offensive against Muslim insurgents, and they will be allowed to return home now that the violence has eased. This is confirmed by one of the spokesperson a few days ago.
And then, in fact, the incident has become quite an embarrassment to the president of the Filipino, who has been actually blamed for this poor leadership and the coordination of the operations. And people complain about this, as some people are very outraged towards this incident, how ignorant that the president could be. And then he has been getting a lot of blames and a lot of pointing fingers.
I wouldn't be surprised, because one of the key importance in any operation is to ensure that your best elite squad shouldn't be squashed.
Yeah.
But for 44 people to die in the hands of terrorists is a huge waste of human lives. And these are people who have been training, specializing in such terrorist activities, because of the lack of coordination and good communication between the president and the commander-in-chief at that time, resulted in the 44 people death. And another thing, we shouldn't underestimate this extremist group in in Mindanao. Even though there was a peace pact signed by the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and with the Filipinos government earlier last year, but a lot of the Islamist separatist insurgents do not recognize the peace pact, and that's a huge problem.
Well, and also at the same time, it rejects the peace pact signed by the much larger, we call it MILF, or Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and also the UN Refugee Agency actually warned that more than 120,000 people have fled their homes in the south due to this fighting.
Okay, so we will take another short break. When we return, we will talk more about other form of protest, like the student Myanmar's protest, as well as some news about Myanmar's economy.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Grace.
Okay, we are back again with our ASEAN Daily, and we start with something stinky.
Okay, what is it, Arlene?
So do you know that a lot of the trash in the Philippines are actually from first world country? They exported it to third world countries like the Philippines, and apparently rotting Canadian garbage making quite a sting in the Philippines.
And it sounds like it's very disrespectful.
It is.
Towards the Philippine, the nation, and they're sending all those garbages to the nation. And wouldn't there be any case of misunderstanding between these two Philippines and Canada?
A lot of people do not know, but a lot of the trash in the first world country, which they produce a lot of it, they don't know where to actually dispose it. So the easiest way is for them to actually ship the trash to third world countries, and they expect the third world countries to deal with it. And I think it's very irresponsible of countries like Canada. I mean, we expect a lot of human rights to be upheld in Canada, especially on environmental issues.
And there are protesters who are trying to appeal to this issue to the Canadian government by asking that they claim the garbage and take it back to Canada. But also, by taking back to Canada, it will actually cost even more for the Philippines to be able to send all those garbages back, and then, my goodness, it's gonna be stinky again, sending
But it's
all the
not
way
just
back.
smell. Apparently, there are a lot of containers holding toxic and hazardous waste, and of course, this is not good. Especially you have a community. A lot of people do not know, but these garbage dunes, they have communities living nearby. Their job is, of course, to collect garbage and to earn very small income at reselling some of the waste for recycling. But to me, I would rather spend the extra money to ship it back, because it's just very, very irresponsible.
At the same time, the Canadian government really needs to look at how they are going to come up with a sort of solution for this, because I'm sure the Philippines is not the only country they're getting all those garbages from Canada or even other developed countries. So perhaps it is something that we have to look into, not only because of the people who live around there, it's also has to really have environmental issues.
And another news that is still ongoing is about Myanmar students' political freedom on campus and in the street. We all know that they have been demonstrating for quite some time regarding on the national education law, even though Myanmar government hasn't really provide much freedom for them to repeal the law. But what we are seeing right now is Myanmar military rulers historically is very suspicious of students, and currently have been forefronting several major uprisings, including the mass 1988 demonstration, and of course now with the current education blueprint, they don't really want the student to speak out against the government.
And then that totally forbids the freedom of expression. And also, student has right to understand the politics, and at the same time they have the right to know what's going on in the nation.
And but they are not being educated well enough to know about politics, and one of the major curtail is a banning on political studies, which is kind of stupid, I think.
And perhaps you will have all those fears, and also by not educating all these students in the one nation, they will just lead to just let them to become followers rather than become innovative leaders in the country.
That's true. I mean, if we don't study various subjects that either is about skill based or it's about critical thinking, I don't think you are able to create a kind of future for Myanmar for a long time. And I think for the current leaders to be very short-sighted on how young people in Myanmar can shape Myanmar for the better, they are only going to make the country even worse, even though they open up their borders for market.
That's correct. And then Myanmar has had enough all those dark days and a dark period of time by banning a lot of stuff. But the education, Myanmar really needs to look at these issues again and again, because after all, it's for the bright future for the generations to be educated in a proper manner. And then if they are banning, it's also they are banning the freedom of expression.
So that's all for our news today. Thanks for listening. You can always listen to us live at durianasian.com or via your mobile app. Tune in and check us out at Durian ASEAN.
And we also have our social channels such as Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. So leave us your feedback and also share our links as well.
Ciao!